So good evening, everyone who has joined the chat. I think we've got 9 people that are registered today, and we're waiting for a few more to come on. So what we'll just do, just hold fire for just a couple of minutes if you're happy to hang on in there. Just wait for a few other people to log on, and it was due to start at 7. So hopefully over the next few minutes we'll get some people joining in, and then we will provide you with a bit of an introduction, and then we'll hand over and get cracking. So I will remind people, if you are an attendee on this webinar today, your mics and your cameras, I believe, should be off anyway automatically. But we will obviously have, and I'll explain it in a minute, functionality for you to ask questions throughout, and also a Q&A session at the end. So we've got a few more people joining in on the chat now. So again, for anyone who's joined now, welcome. We are just going to leave it just a couple more minutes. We're meant to kick off at 7, but we've got a few more people joining now. So I think we'll just give everyone a good opportunity to get in on the chat, and make sure that we're all here. The session will be recorded, so again, I'll explain that more in detail a little bit, but anything that's on here today will be recorded and we will be putting it out, so anyone who hasn't been able to attend tonight will be able to view what's happened. So if we just give another minute or so, and then I'll crack on with introductions. Right, so it's a few minutes past 7 now, so I think what we'll do is we'll crack on. So a big welcome to everyone who's joined and signed up for this webinar today. Thank you very much. I'd like to formally welcome you to what is Woking Borough's very first Climate Action Week. This Climate Action Week is being run in partnership between ourselves at Woodley Town Council and Woking Borough Council. My name is Matthew Fillmore. I'm the Deputy Town Clerk at Woodley Town Council. This event came out of discussions from our town councillors earlier in the year. We as a town council have pledged to achieve net zero status, carbon status, by 2030. And earlier in the year, councillors asked for us to do some more work in terms of promoting that amongst residents, and kind of raising the profile of climate emergency. We have colleagues from Woking Borough Council on the call today. We have Resh and Sophia. Woking Borough Council have a slightly bigger role to play in the climate emergency than us as a town council. As a borough, they are responsible for the carbon footprint of the borough almost as a whole, and have a lot of responsibilities for trying to manage that and lower that. So working together, we're doing everything we can really to kind of raise the profile of that. Tonight's session itself is on electric vehicles. Very kindly, this is being hosted by the Energy Saving Trust. So the host tonight is Mark Smith. I won't provide you with any information about him as an introduction. He can do that himself when he comes on the call in a minute, and will introduce himself. He has around about a 50-minute presentation on electric vehicles, lots of information, lots of details, lots of kind of misinformation, and trying to explain the situation with electric vehicles, charging points, etc., etc. So it's bound to be a really interesting session. The session has been recorded tonight, as I explained earlier, and will be put out on our YouTube channel subsequently from this event. There is also the ability for you we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Now, to do that, hopefully those of you who are familiar with Teams will know this. On your panel, you should see next to the people on the chat, you should see that there is a Q&A option. If you click the Q&A option, you'll get a panel, and in there, there's the ability to start asking questions at any point during the webinar itself. We'll try not to interrupt Mark's webinar with any questions unless they're particularly pertinent to that point that Mark's making. But what we'll be able to do is go through those questions at the end, ask them. The relevant person will be able to then chip in with an answer for that. If we can't, for any reason, answer it, what we'll do is we'll go away, get the information for you, and we'll be able to then provide that directly back to you. And all those Q&As will also publish online on our website alongside a link to the video so people can see afterwards. So one last thing just before we crack on, obviously, as I say, this is on Climate Action Week. We've been going since Monday and it runs until Saturday. There are still some events that we've got going on this week. So if you are interested in any of our other events, please do look at our council website and sign up to those. That's woodley.gov.uk. On Friday, we've got a climate coffee and cake chat at our Oakwood Centre. Free coffee and cake for those people who turn up. And an opportunity to have a real open discussion and chat about climate issues that are affecting us. At the same time, we'll also have some rolling videos going on in our theatre, which will be on throughout the day, and you can stay around and have something in our cafe if you want and view that. And then on Saturday, we've got two events running in the morning. We have a climate fresque card game, which is an opportunity to sit down in small groups, do this card game based around the climate emergency, and raise some talking points around that. That's a good fun session. We've also got a communal litter pick being organised by our wonderful Woodley Adopt a Street group. That's also happening on Saturday morning, if that's more your bag. So yeah, if you want to do that, please look at our website and feel free to register. So that'll be enough from me. What I'll do now is hand on to Mark, who will kick off the webinar. And please don't forget the Q&A section if you do have any questions, and we'll come back at the end. Mark, it's over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. And yeah, good evening, everybody. It's great to be talking to you all this evening. I'm just going to do a shameless plug before I get going for the Climate Fresque session. So I did a Climate Fresque workshop, Energy Saving Trust, as an attendee a few months ago now, and it was a really, really good session. I knew a fair bit about climate beforehand, but I know a lot more now. So if you've got any other questions about kind of around the science behind climate change stuff, it's a really, really good session. It's really, really well facilitated by volunteers. So yeah, it's a super session to be involved in. But this evening, as Matthew said, we're here to talk about EVs. So I will, hopefully you can see my presentation. If someone could give me a thumbs up or similar to say that it's come up, that would be great.
That all looks good on my screen,
Brilliant.
Mark.
Thank you, Matthew. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about EVs, and really my kind of remit, or the ask of me for today was to kind of come along and talk to you a little bit about EVs, tell you a bit about kind of how they are, how they work, what they are, what they're not, how you use them, and then try and kind of bust some of the key myths, or the big myths that we hear a lot when we talk to the public or when we talk to councils about EVs. So that's what I'm going to try and do in the next sort of 50 minutes or so. And as Matthew said, please do use the Q&A. If there's anything I don't cover that you've got a question on, I'm more than happy to pick up those questions as we go, or at the end, kind of whatever works better. In terms of kind of why me, so I work obviously for Energy Saving Trust. I work in our transport team, and one of the things that I do and we do as a transport team is to work with local authorities like Wokingham and like the Town Council in Woodley to come along and help develop EV strategies, but also do this kind of event, talking to council officers and talking to the general public around kind of what EVs are, what they can do, what they can't, and hopefully try and allay some of the worries that have been perhaps stirred up in the mainstream media around the transition to EV. So this is what we're going to talk about. Oops, let's get the slides actually moving. This is what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of why you might want to switch to an EV, what they are, how you charge them, some of the myths around EVs. And then if we've got a little bit of time at the end, we can touch on some of the routes to driving. If not, we can skip that bit and go straight to the Q&A, either or. Before we get into that, so as I said, I work for Energy Saving Trust. If you haven't heard of us, this is who we are and what we do. We're an independent organisation and we work to address the climate emergency. We provide leadership and expertise, aiming to deliver or working towards a zero carbon society. And across our business, we work with anybody and everybody. So right from kind of individuals and householders, which some of our advice teams do, businesses, communities, governments, local, national, regional, and help everybody try and save energy, reduce carbon emissions. So we've been going on that for around about 30 years, and we've got offices right across the country now, which is a great thing to see for us. And then there's a little bit about our transport team as well. On top of the work that I do, we also manage the local EV infrastructure scheme, which, if you've not heard of it, you could be forgiven if you don't work in local government. But what it is a very large £380 million project across the country to help roll out public EV infrastructure schemes, of which Wokingham is one of the recipients. And some of those charge points will be going in around Woodley as well. As Matthew said, as we go through, if you do have some questions, there should be a Q&A tab at the top of your screen. It should look something like that. Please do use that if you have any questions as we go through. We will also be using Slido, and hopefully that has come up for all of you as a QR code and a hashtag. So you can either go to slido.com on your browser, or on a browser if you're on a laptop, or if you're on your phone. You should be able to tap or click the QR code or scan the QR code with your phone if you want to use a separate device, and that will take you to a little bit of audience participation that we're going to have running throughout, just to kind of make sure you're all awake and make sure I haven't put any of you to sleep. And this will come up. The information on this slide will come up on every page that's got a question on it. So let's test it out with our first question, which hopefully will come up for all of you if you've managed to find that link. So have you ever driven an electric or a plug-in hybrid vehicle before? Is our first question. Great, so it's good to see that some of you have driven EVs before. Okay, some of you not, that's good. Hopefully at the end of the day, you can come out of this feeling a bit more confident that you at least would be willing to test drive or try an EV at an event if you go to one, or at the next one you go to. From my side, although I work for Energy Saving Trust, I also own an EV. I've driven an EV since 2018. Before that, I drove a plug-in hybrid. So I've got a fair amount of experience now in terms of actually what these vehicles are like to own and run as a daily drive. So if you've got any questions about that, more than happy to take those as well. Okay, that is working, and I think we've got the majority of people answered that now. So we'll go on to the next one. So are you considering an EV for your next vehicle? And I have also got an option on here if you don't intend to buy another car, or if you don't intend to buy any car. If you don't own a car at the moment and you don't want one, fair enough. Great to see that some of you are considering it. That's great. Hopefully those of you that are undecided at the minute, hopefully again after this session you might be a bit more decided around what they can do for you. And the last question for the moment is, this should come up as a word cloud, so when you start putting answers in, they will pop up on the screen. The more times someone says something, the bigger the answer will get. So what are your biggest concerns around driving an EV? And hopefully again, as we go through the presentation today, we can try and address some of those. Range is probably the number one question that we get asked, or concern that we hear. So that's not a surprise. Cost and purchase cost, yep. Tariffs, longevity, yep. Good stuff, yep. And we will cover off pretty much all of those in the course of this presentation. But again, like I say, I'm happy to take questions as we go as well. So let's talk a little bit about why you might want to switch to an EV. Well, if you think kind of big picture, so big national picture, as I'm sure you're probably aware, by law, our emissions as a country have to be net zero by 2050. And Prime Minister Keir Starmer has recently committed us to an 81% reduction by 2035, as he's been at the COP in Azerbaijan the last couple of weeks. And at the moment, as you've probably seen, the previous government committed to ending the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2035. The new government, the Labour government, has promised in its manifesto to bring that date forward again to 2030, but that hasn't been actually actioned in Parliament yet, so we're waiting. That's what the asterisk is for. We're just waiting for that date to move back to 2030. And all of this, the kind of the point of this is to kind of move us all as a country towards a carbon-free travel and transport network as part of the fight to mitigate climate change, reduce pollution, particularly in urban and built-up areas, and also grow our green economy. On top of those kind of big key aims, there's also something called the Zero Emissions Vehicle Mandate, which again has been in the news a bit recently. And what that says effectively to car manufacturers and dealers is that every year from now until 2035, you must sell a certain proportion of your sales must be zero emissions vehicles, whether that's EV or some other zero emissions drivetrain is left up to the manufacturer. For reasons that will probably become apparent fairly shortly, an awful lot of them are going EV with that. There have been some rumours, and again, you may have seen this in the press, that those targets are going to be scaled back or changed. Again, at the moment, as far as I know, they are just rumours. We don't know any more than kind of what's been publicly announced. But that's our target. Those are our targets for the next kind of 2025, 2030, 2035. And there is also a target for this year and for every year in between those. But I thought rather than give you 15 years worth of numbers to look at, it was more useful to look at just a few of them. And the idea being that by 2035, every new vehicle sold will be 100% zero emissions for cars and for vans. There are separate targets for HGVs and buses, but for cars and vans by 2035, every new sale should be an electric vehicle. Right now, we have just a smidgen under, probably slightly more than that now, just a smidgen under 1.3 million pure battery electric vehicles on the roads. This is data from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. It's published every month, and you can see it on the ZapMap link on the slide there. Then that's grown an enormous amount. It's not that particular graph, but it has grown in an enormous amount over the last couple of years. Excuse me one moment before my laptop decides I can't have access to the internet anymore. Let's hope that works. And as you can see on that slide, apologies for that, as you can see on that slide, the number of battery electric sales as a percentage of the total vehicle parks, that's all the vehicles on the roads in the country, has grown quite significantly over the last 4 years. Clearly there is a bit of a tail going back behind that as well, but it's been particularly marked over the last 4 years or so, that has started to really pick up pace. So that's where we are as a nation. Let's talk a little bit more about what I actually mean when I say an electric vehicle, and I suspect my internet is going to decide to drop out in a minute, thanks to my VPN. So bear with me for 1 second while I make sure I'm still here. Right, apologies for that. Am I back? Or am I still here?
You are back. We can hear you. So
thank goodness.
That's good, isn't it?
Good. Apologies for the vagaries of technology not allowing me to do that before I came onto this webinar. Anyway, let's talk about what an electric vehicle is. Another Slido poll coming up on the next slide. So, when was the first electric car developed? And there's a few options here. What do you think? Okay. No one's taken the obvious bait. Okay. I'll give that 1 more minute, just in case. Okay. If you said the 1830s, you are correct. So that up on the top left-hand corner of the slide is the 1832 electric vehicle developed by Robert Anderson. I don't know how far it went. I would guess not very far. But all of the decades on the previous question, there was an electric car developed in every single one of those decades. So the first one was in 1832. The next one was in 1897 with the Hummingbird electric cab, which was the first electric cab in London. And then, I don't know how old any of you are, but some of you may remember some of these as we get towards the 1970s and the 1990s. The City Car SV48, the General Motors EV1, the Tesla Roadster, the first generation of that car, and it's now in its second generation, I believe. And then what I guess most people would probably call the birth of the modern electric vehicle in 2010 with the Nissan Leaf first generation as well. That car is also on its second generation now. So yeah, electric vehicles are not a particularly new technology. They have been around for a long time. I haven't got on here the traditional milk float, but that obviously counts as well. But yeah, so they're not a new idea. They've been around for a long time, but in the very early stages, they were the battery technology certainly wasn't there, nor was the charging infrastructure, and they were generally a bit more difficult to get around in. Now, obviously, we're in a very much different landscape for EVs, which we'll come on to talk about in a minute. So yeah, congratulations to the few of you that said 1830s. Well done. So when we talk about battery electric vehicles today, there is a little bit of kind of confusion, although you start to get acronyms creeping in very quickly when you get into EVs. So what we're going to talk about here is BEV versus PHEV. So battery electric vehicle, BEV, versus plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, or PHEV. There's a few examples of each on the slide there. Hopefully you'll be able to recognise a few of the EVs at least on the roads that you may have been seen driving around. Plug-in hybrid are a bit more difficult to spot because you have to really know what you're looking for. They're they look pretty much exactly the same as a normal car, as do the EVs. Obviously, no front radiator grille for most EVs. But so the ones on the left-hand side, the battery electric vehicles, they can be known as EVs, they can be known as BEVs, they can be known as 100% electric, they might be called pure electric, depends who you talk to, depends which particular flavour of acronym they've picked up. They can be called any of those things. They've generally now, new EVs will have a range of anywhere between 120 and 300 miles, and in a few slides' time, there is one EV, or there are 3 EVs, I think, actually, if you've got enough money in your back pocket, that will do over 400 miles on a charge, or they will claim to at least. Overall, there are over 230 pure electric vehicles on the market at the moment. So if you want to go out tomorrow and buy an EV, you've got over 230 choices of model in kind of pretty much every shape and colour and size you can think of. These ones, obviously, one of the big selling points, particularly for urban areas, is that these cars have pretty significant emissions reductions over a petrol or diesel vehicle. There are obviously no tailpipe emissions because there's no tailpipe, but there are still some emissions associated with these vehicles from tyre wear and tear and brake dust. So they're not completely emissions free, but they are significantly better than petrol or diesel vehicles in terms of emissions. On the right hand side, you've got the PHEVs. Look, like I say, very similar to a standard petrol diesel car because they've got an internal combustion engine, or an ICE or an ICE engine, and they have a small battery backup as well, or battery that can drive the wheels as well. They will not go as far as a pure EV. They will generally do around about 20 to 50 miles. I think there's a BMW that's no longer in production as a new vehicle that does about 80 miles on its electric range only, and then the internal combustion engine will kick in to take it the rest of the distance. These vehicles, there's around about 80 on the market. A lot of the manufacturers, if they didn't already have a PHEV offering, are now skipping a PHEV variant of their model and going straight to an EV, or offering it as a mild hybrid of some description. But the key point around PHEVs and mild hybrids and anything else that has any kind of combustion engine is that it is a part of those vehicles of which the new sales are banned from 2035. Having said all that about EVs, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't bang the drum for the sustainable transport hierarchy, which basically says don't travel if you don't have to, and if you do have to travel, think about how you're doing it and if you can, use the lowest emissions form of travel for the journey purpose that you are making. So obviously starting at the top with digital communication, things like this, where we don't have to come all meet in one place, we can do it online. In most cases now is a good option, particularly for things like this. Beyond that, if you can walk or wheel or cycle for your trip, you could do that. If you can't do that, if it's too far to walk, wheel or cycle, could you take public or shared transport? If you can't do that for whatever reason, can you look at EVs and can you look at car sharing, particularly with EVs? Beyond that, you can then start to look at, do I need to take an internal combustion engine vehicle? And below that is air travel. Obviously, there is some nuance in that. I'm not saying that everybody should walk, wheel or cycle for every single journey because that's not practical. But it's just trying to encourage people to think about the decisions on how you travel and where you travel a bit more than perhaps we have become accustomed to, and just getting in our cars for every single journey. As you can see from the picture on the bottom right, if we all transition to EVs tomorrow, that doesn't solve the congestion problems that a lot of us are facing, particularly in urban areas. If we all transition to an EV, you've still got tailbacks on the roads. If we all get in a bus or if we all got on a bike, that is a much reduced problem, although it doesn't entirely go away. So there is that kind of consideration to think about as well. Now, one of the big things that people get, I guess, concerned about when they think about transitioning to an EV and what that might mean for how they might have to change kind of what they do and how they use it, how they use their vehicle, is how and where they're going to charge it. So the next section I'm going to talk about is a little bit about charging, and we'll start with a bit more jargon busting. So if you are not from an electrical engineering background, you might be forgiven for not understanding kilowatt hours versus kilowatts and what the differences are. So very simply, kilowatt hours are a measure of energy, and that's how big a battery, how much energy the battery can store. So that's what you'll see EV battery size quoted in. Very simply, the bigger the number of kilowatt hours, the longer the car's range, the bigger the battery. Think of it as your fuel tank, as in your petrol diesel vehicle at the moment. A kilowatt, on the other hand, is a measure of power, and that's what charge points are rated in. And again, very simply, the higher the number of kilowatts, the faster the charge you're going to get from that charge point up to a point, and we'll come to that in a minute. But basically, we tend to say don't think about it as the same as fueling up your petrol or diesel vehicle, because it's not. Think about it as filling up a bath. So if you turn on your taps just a little bit at home when you're filling up your bath, you're going to get a little trickle of water out the tap. That's going to fill up your bath, but it will do it really, really slowly. If you turn the tap on full whack, obviously your bath's going to fill up a lot quicker. Similar principles around EV charging. It's not just one speed. There are various different speeds, and again, we'll get onto that in a second, and how they can all work in different situations for different people and different purposes. Another bit of jargon before we get there, though, around AC and DC charging. So you'll hear these often combined with a kilowatt rating on a charger. So with AC charging, that's what you'll find at home, and that's what you'll find on homes where people have got their own charge point installed. It's also what you'll find in most on-street charging locations is an AC charger. And what that means is that you plug your car into the charge point socket on the side of the road or in your house or wherever you are. The electricity will flow through that charger into the onboard charger in the car. From there, it will get in that onboard charger, it will be converted to DC, and DC will be transferred into the battery of the vehicle for storing and then later use as you drive off. So that's alternating current or AC. That's what we supply within our houses. DC, direct current, on the other hand, comes from an EV point of view. It comes from the big rapid charging stations or similar that you will find perhaps in some supermarket car parks like Lidl and Morrison's, excuse me, or you might find them in service stations or perhaps in kind of big purpose-built hubs as well. They provide power straight to the battery. They bypass that onboard charger in the car because the conversion from AC to DC is handled outside of the vehicle in the big kind of person-sized unit on the side of the road or on the side of the car park, and that allows them to deliver a much faster, more powerful charge into your car. So that's where you get the higher rate of charge, the higher charge speed, where it takes much less time to charge the car. In terms of EV charging, we classify that as slow, standard, fast, rapid, and ultra rapid. So on the slower end of the AC charging, you've got 3.7 kilowatt through to around about 8-ish kilowatt chargers. So that's slow, standard, and fast on AC. As you get kind of midway through that fast range of speed of power, you start transitioning into DC, and DC is where your rapid and ultra rapid charging points live. That will make a lot more sense in a minute, because I'm going to talk a little bit about how long it takes to charge on these different speeds. And this will all be in the slides, and it will all be in the recording, of course. So you can go back and digest this in a bit more detail afterwards if I am talking too quickly and there is a bit too much information here, which I appreciate. There is a lot. Talking of charging types, these are some of the ones you may have seen around. So starting on the left-hand side with the slow chargers, like I said, these are the sort of ones you might see as a home charger. So you've got the picture in the top left there of a Tesla plugged into a home charger, and a car, I think it's a Volkswagen, plugged into a lamp column charger. So these are the slower form of charging. They'll take a number of hours to charge your car, but they are pretty readily available, and you can charge your vehicle, your car, your EV off of a standard 3-pin socket at your house, at somebody else's house, if you want to. There are safer ways to charge. It is not the best way to charge, because there are some safety protocols built into dedicated EV charging points that don't exist in plugging into a 3-pin plug, but it is a perfectly safe way to charge your car in an emergency if you need to. Moving along slightly to the standard charging, these are the charge points you'll often see in car parks or in multi-stories attached to walls, things like that, or as a bollard coming up out of the ground in a lot of cases as well. Again, it will take a number of hours to recharge your car. Generally, these are installed in places where you are likely to be spending a number of hours. So you're not looking for a quick top up. You're looking to stop and stay for a few hours and do your shopping, or go to the cinema, or go to whatever. And the idea is that you plug your car in. You probably won't get a full charge, but you will get some, and that is enough to get you onto your next destination. Moving across again, these ones start to look pretty much the same as we get towards the fast, rapid, and ultra rapid brackets for charging. And they are, like I said before, they are the bigger units you see, generally sort of person-sized, maybe a little bit taller in the case of those units, the Instavolt units with the V on them. And this is where you start to get into the much quicker charging speeds. And these are the ones you find in service stations, places where you are going to stop for likely less than an hour. In the case of service stations, I guess as little as you possibly can. But the idea is that you will still get a good level of charge from these chargers while you're in the service station doing, going to the toilet, getting a coffee, having a walk around, stretching your legs, all that kind of stuff. And you can come back to your car after 20 minutes, half an hour, and you have the vast majority of your battery will be full again. That picture in the bottom right hand side is the GridServe electric forecourt in Braintree in Essex. And there are other GridServe electric forecourts popping up around the country as well. Other charge point operators are available, but this is a particularly useful kind of picture because it shows the scale of some of the installations that are going in now. So it is a service centre, it's a service area purely for EV drivers and people with an EV. And what you can't see on the screen, because it's too small, and I don't think they're in the picture anyway, is that all of those chargers have different speed rating, or can have different speed ratings on them. So any vehicle, any EV that rolls up to one of them will be able to use that charge point at its maximum capacity. And that's what you can see there. And inside the building at the far end of that picture, there's a cafe, there's a shop, all the things and the toilets, and there's business, there's meeting pods and all that kind of stuff if you're traveling for business. There's all the kind of things you would find in a traditional service station. It's run by GridServe in this particular instance. So that is a really quick run through charging types. We will come back to that in a second when I talk about charging speed. But one of the things that people often get a little bit confused about is how many different connectors there are when you're thinking about charging EVs. which is the subject of our next question. So how many different charging connectors are there available for EVs, do you think? I'm talking about the things that plug into the car, not what plugs in at the other end. That's a nice even split. Thank you, all 4 of you. Sophia, that's cheating. Yep, you're absolutely right. If you said 3, you are correct. If you said 4, you are also technically correct. But the 3 main ones are the Type 2, which is the one in the top left, which is the one you use for the slower end of the charging. So if you're at home, or if you're at one of the pedestal chargers or the bollard chargers that we showed on the previous slide, that links quite often with the CCS charging system, which is the next one below it. That is used for rapid and ultra rapid charging. The other one to think about, which is being phased out reasonably quickly now, is the CHAdeMO, which is charge de mode, which is a European standard, or actually it's a Japanese, Far Eastern Japanese standard. Used to be common on Nissans. Again, like I say, it's being phased out a bit now, where those vehicles are transitioning, particularly for European markets, to CCS and Type 2, because very simply, a CCS system is a Type 2 system with an extra bit on it. And commonly, I don't have a picture of it in this slide deck, but what essentially you have is a little extra flap on your car. You just pull it aside, and you can use the CCS. It's basically the same socket as a Type 2. The other type that you will find is a Type 1 on the very first generation. Things like the very first generation Nissan Leaf and a couple of early plug-in hybrids might have a Type 1 charger. I think you have to search quite hard to find a vehicle that's got that on now. A lot of those will be reaching the end of their useful life, I suspect, in the next few years, if not already, for various reasons, not because the battery is degraded. There are also Tesla chargers, but they are basically a Type 2. They look exactly the same, as far as I can tell, and they will allow you to use all the charge points as you would expect them to. I said we would come back to talk about charging times, and this is where we're going to do that. So we've got 4 vehicles on the slide there. The brand new Hyundai Insta, an MG4, 2 variants of an MG4 because they've got different batteries, and a Peugeot E208 again to illustrate kind of a different size of battery. And the bracketed number is what amount of that battery is actually usable. So in the case of the Hyundai, it's a 42 kilowatt hour battery, but only 39 kilowatt hours of that battery is deemed usable. The car and the battery management system within the car deliberately hold back 3 kilowatt hours of battery power, one to protect the battery, but also to give you a little bit of a buffer of driving range if you do end up for some reason struggling to find a charger when you need one. And that's the same or similar principle, at least for all of those vehicles. All of these vehicles have a different onboard charger, which is the other reason for including the 4 different ones in this comparison. So again, the Hyundai Insta's got an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. That means on some charge points, it will be able to charge faster than the MG or the Peugeot. This will get a bit more easy to understand, hopefully, in this. So we're talking here about charging from empty to full. So on a slow charger, it's going to take you, as you can see, at least 10 hours to charge your battery from completely empty. So you've had to get some help to push this car close enough to a charge point to get it plugged in. So to completely full, so from 0 to 100% charge, is going to take you roughly 10 hours. In the case of the long-range MG4, it's going to take you nearly 17. But how often do you ever run your petrol or diesel car that low on fuel? Would be my question to all of you on the call. I would be amazed if anyone's ever actually done it deliberately, let alone accidentally. So although that says kind of empty to full and it's going to take you 16 hours, it's not going to take you 16 hours because you won't ever push your car into a charge bay unless something's gone catastrophically wrong for you. Staying on the empty to full, if you're using a standard charger out in the public, it's going to take you kind of anything up to about 9 hours to charge a car. Again, from completely empty to completely full. So again, not likely to be actually kind of what you do in practice, but it's there to kind of illustrate the point that it is going to take a number of hours. And what I kind of encourage you to think about here is plugging in overnight. So with all these vehicles, if you plugged in, don't know how many of you work, how many of you don't, how many of you work away at an office during the day. If you come home at 5, 6 o'clock at night, plug your car in, it's going to be ready for you to depart at 7 o'clock in the morning easily, if you need it to. If you're looking at fast chargers, and this gets a little bit more complicated with fast chargers, because when I say fast charger, I mean around about a 22 kilowatt rated charge point. None of these cars on this slide will take a 22 kilowatt charge at its most powerful. They simply can't do it because of the onboard charger, and that's what that onboard charger shows. That was up on next to the battery size. So what that means is that the Hyundai Insta will charge on a fast charger, on a 22 kilowatt AC charger. It will charge at a maximum of 11 kilowatts per hour. Same with the MG4, it will charge at a maximum of 6.6, at the Peugeot at 7.4. So that's why, even though you see a charge point rated at 22 kilowatts, you may not be able to get a 22 kilowatt charge from that charger, but you will still be able to use it. It's just limited by the capacity of your onboard charger in your vehicle. So it will still take you, a number of hours to get the charge off of that charger. When we talk about rapid and ultra rapids, the general consensus, and again, this is from manufacturers as well as kind of charge point industry itself, they talk about between 20 to 80% charge, because that is when your vehicle is charging at its fastest, and that's when the charger will allow your vehicle to charge at its fastest possible speed. So again, if you think about when you're likely to be using these big rapid charging units, you're going to be doing it kind of on the way to or from somewhere, probably on a main road, probably in a service station where you don't want to be spending an enormous amount of time. So if and you're not going to get there, with absolutely no charge, and you shouldn't probably leave with completely full charge either. So on a 50 kilowatt rapid charger, it's going to take you no more than 45 minutes to charge up any of those vehicles from 20 to 80%, which is plenty long enough, like I said earlier, for you to go in, get a coffee, get a drink, go to the loo, freshen up, and then get back in the car and be ready to drive. When we talk about the ultra rapid charging, this is when it gets really quick, and this is where I'd say, you go in, you plug in, you've had a coffee, you've had a toilet break, you've wandered around the car park for a bit, you checked your emails, whatever, and you're back in the car, you're ready to go in about 20 minutes, roughly. The brackets on that column are the maximum charge speed that the vehicles can take from an ultra rapid charger. So there are ultra rapid chargers available up to 350 kilowatts. There's only, I think, 4 or 5 vehicles, maybe not even that can take a charge that powerful. So the most powerful charge one any of these cars can take is the MG4 long range, which can charge at a maximum of 142 kilowatts. And if you were able to do that, you would get a charge from 20 to 80% in 15 minutes, which is pretty quick. And I have that car. I have an MG4 long range. I have seen it do 142 kilowatts on a charger, and it is quick. So it does exist. It does happen in real life. Part of the reason that manufacturers and charge point manufacturers recommend that you don't charge beyond 80% on a rapid charger and ultra rapid charger is because of this. And this is called the charging curve. And what this effectively means is that above a certain point, generally around about 80%, the speed of the charge drops right off, and that's managed by the charge point, not by your vehicle, and it drops right off to protect the battery of that vehicle, because charging at that kind of power is quite hard on the battery, and the battery heats up as it's recharging at those kind of higher end powers. So what that means is that as the battery gets fuller, the charge point and the battery talk to each other, and the charge point will tail off the speed that you're getting from that charger as you get higher up, which obviously means it gives the battery a bit of a chance to cool down, but it also means you're charging a bit that much more slowly. So we often quote that, you know, the last 20% or 10% of a charge will take as long on a rapid or ultra rapid charger as the rest of the charge that you've put into the vehicle. To do that last little bit, particularly prevalent for ultra rapid chargers for obvious reasons. They are doing, they are charging at that much greater power than a 50 kilowatt charger. But it does happen on 50 kilowatt chargers as well. It doesn't happen on the AC chargers. The batteries can manage that heat dissipation much more easily from those slower, less powerful chargers. I appreciate that's quite a challenging concept potentially to get your head around. I got this graph off of somewhere called the evdatabase.org. They have a list of all of the EVs that are available in the country. They have these charge point graphs for most of them, if not all of them. So I would encourage you to go and have a look on there if you want to go and have a look anywhere for any more information about a particular model of EV. That is a really good place to start. If you're talking about finding charge points, this is a screenshot from ZapMap of hopefully an area that you will recognize. It shows kind of the variety of charge points around. ZapMap, by the way, is a free resource. They do, this is their main kind of product, I guess, the charge point map, which has it has live data on it from almost every charge point operator in the country. So you'll be able to see where there are charge points for a start, if those charge points are available, if they're in use, if they're out of service. And if you click into any of these charge points, which I haven't done, so obviously you wouldn't be able to see the map so well, it will tell you a bit about where they are. Specifically, in some cases, if it's in a multi-story car park, they will often tell you, the charger's on level 3 on the right-hand side or something. It will tell you how much they are, and it will give you often a link to the provider's webpage as well. With some networks, some charge point networks, you can also pay through ZapMap as well, which is really handy if you don't have your password, 50 million passwords on hand to get into the app to get to every single charge point. It's a free resource. It's available on a browser on the internet. Equally, you can use it. They've got phone apps for Apple and for Android phones, and they're really, really handy to have kind of on you as you go around. Obviously, not when you're driving. If you've got a passenger who can help you navigate to the nearest charge point, that's really helpful. And they're a really, really good resource, like I say, to have in your pocket when you're looking for charge points out and about. They've also got a route planner as well. That is a bit of a run through charging. I'm going to quickly go through a few myths around EVs, and then we'll get into the Q&A because I know there's a few questions waiting in there. So one more question before we get into this. What is the average range of a new EV, do you think? Sorry, check nobody's fallen asleep. I gave this one away earlier, didn't I? Didn't think about that. Yep. Yep. So I think that's pretty much everybody. So the vast majority of you are absolutely right. The average range of an EV, a new EV on the market today, is 236 miles. There are, as ever, some caveats to that. So when I was putting this presentation together, I found a company called Nimblefins had put out some kind of average car costs for small, medium, and SUV style cars, and those are the brackets in those on this slide. Is the price range of kind of the average car in those ranges. What I've done from that is go into the EV database and have a look for some cars that fitted into that price bracket, and had a look at what their range would be, or what their stated range is. So for a small EV, anywhere from 19,000 to 26,000, you will get a range of between 100 and 160 miles. For a medium-sized EV, so between 26 and 28,500 pounds, you'll likely get sort of between 145 and 185 miles range. And SUV style EVs, again about 29,000 to 33,500, you'll get roughly 165 to 215 miles. The reason I've put the Vauxhall Frontera in there as a particular vehicle is that Vauxhall I believe, and that the Vauxhall Frontera is the first vehicle in the country to be available to the public to buy that is price equal between every single drivetrain. So they do a petrol variant, they do a plug-in hybrid variant, I believe, and they also do a fully electric variant, which is that 44 kilowatt hour version on the slide there. And they are all exactly, they start from exactly the same price point in monthly payment, and if you just walk in and buy it cash, and that will get you around about 155 miles. But like I say, the average range, so there are a lot of EVs not covered in those price brackets. So when you count for all of those, you come out with around about 236 miles, which is the average range of a new EV. Like I say, the longest range EV is a Mercedes-Benz something, lots of numbers and letters. It will do 425 miles. It also costs about £112,000. So again, if you've got a lot of spare change, go wild, because it's a really nice car, but you will pay for it. But I would encourage you to think about your kind of daily drives, your weekly drives, for those of you that don't drive daily. How far do you go? Do you drive 236 miles on a regular basis? Or do you drive less than that? Do you drive more than that? I appreciate some of you may well do. In a lot of cases, though, 200 miles is going to be more than enough range to get you kind of your average kind of weekly trips. My car, I've got an MG4 long range, like I said. It will do 280 miles, roughly. I plug it in maybe once every 10 days. Maybe not even that if I'm not doing an awful lot of miles. So yeah. So they can now go the distance. So the days of kind of every EV doing less than 100 miles are pretty much gone now. A lot of EVs will do a considerable distance further than that, even including ones on the second-hand market. The other question we get a lot is around batteries and whether they have to keep being replaced. Will they degrade? How much will they degrade? I know one of the concerns at the start of this was around longevity of batteries. The very short answer is no. There is no particular issue around EV batteries and then running out of charge. So again, this was a concern kind of in the early days of EVs. Understandably, manufacturers have been doing some research and some testing around this, and current estimates put battery degradation somewhere around 1 or 2% per year. Almost every EV manufacturer will offer a warranty that is around about 7 or 8 years long, that specifically covers the battery performance and battery degradation. Quite often that warranty is longer than the warranty that covers the bodywork of the vehicle, which kind of shows you how much confidence those manufacturers have got in their battery performance over the 7 or 8 years that they're offering that warranty. There has been a test, particularly if you search it on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find it, but I think the Everything Electric show did a test on a Tesla that had done 250,000 miles on its original battery. They found that battery still had over 90% of its original capacity left. So it was still doing at least 90% of its original stated range, having done 250,000 miles. So the early concerns about kind of batteries running out or wearing out are pretty much not a concern for a modern EV now. And if you should find yourself in possession of an EV where the battery has degraded past that point where a warranty would cover it, the warranty will cover it, and it will be replaced for you, often for free. If for any reason you have an end-of-life EV battery for some reason, they don't just get chucked in the bin. They can be repurposed for energy storage. So like I said before, the kind of constant charge-discharge cycle of being an EV battery is quite difficult for batteries. It's quite hard. It's quite a hard life being an EV battery. If you take that battery out of an EV, you can put it into a static storage facility, possibly linked to a solar farm, could be on a kind of domestic battery installation, something like that, where the charge and discharge cycle is much more gentle on the battery. And it's much slower kind of overall. Beyond that, there's also a big industry now on battery repurposing and recycling. So part of it's for energy storage. There are other companies now specializing in breaking down and extracting the chemicals from those batteries so that they can repurpose the components within them into a new battery. This is all kind of, I guess, born out of the fact that manufacturers are understandably completely worried about their or increasingly cautious, sorry, about their supply chains, where their minerals are coming from. And so the manufacturers are actively looking for better alternatives or alternatives that kind of increase the circularity of what they're putting out. And yeah, that's where this is coming from. On top of that, there are manufacturers, or the likes of Tesla and BYD, so Build Your Dreams, which is one of the Chinese marks that's kind of make its way into the UK at the minute, are using different and new battery technology. So Tesla using cobalt-free batteries, BYD using a sodium-ion mix. On top of that, there are also there are other ways around kind of battery concerns about mining and the kind of carbon emissions from mining and the general conditions of the mining of EV battery stuff. There's a company called Cornish Lithium looking at repurposing old tin mines in Cornwall and extracting lithium from the same ground that has been used for tin, obviously in the past. They had no use for lithium at that point, or limited use for lithium at that point. Clearly, we now have quite a big use for lithium in all sorts of rechargeable batteries. So there is a kind of local-ish supply as well, potentially. What's better for the environment? Should you run your old petrol diesel vehicle until it grinds to a halt, or should you switch to an EV? I think this is my last poll, and then you can all go to sleep if you want to. One more minute. Yeah, you can see where this presentation is going, can't you? Yes, it is probably better to switch to an EV. So there's been some work done by a company called Transport and Environment, and what they have found is that the CO2 emitted over the lifetime of an electric vehicle, you are going to break even in terms of carbon emissions very, very quickly. So for an EV, for an electric car with a battery produced using a clean grid to power the factory that produced the battery, and if you're running that EV on green electricity, so whether that's solar farms or solar power, sorry, from a domestic generation, or if you're using a green tariff from the grid, the carbon debt is going to be paid back with less than a year of driving. If you do that, if you kind of change that analysis and you look at the worst case scenario, so for Transport and Environment, what they did was look at an EV battery produced in China, run on the dirtiest grid in Europe, which is in Poland. It's a very heavily coal dependent grid. You're still paying that back after about 3 years of driving, just over 3 years of driving. And that's the kind of crossover point where your EV, over its lifetime, and that includes all of the emissions from the production of the battery, as well as all the driving emissions, is going to be less than if you continue to drive a petrol or diesel vehicle. And obviously, as renewable electricity generation increases, emissions from the manufacturing are going to fall, emissions from refueling are going to fall, and that gets even better than that graph already makes it look. On top of that, we're talking about pollution. I mentioned brake dust and tyre wear earlier. The RAC have found that EVs, will emit less brake dust than ICE vehicles, so internal combustion engine vehicles, because they regeneratively brake. So as you lift off the accelerator in an electric vehicle, it will start applying the brakes to a greater or lesser extent. That will put some power back into the battery, but it will also effectively it runs the motor in reverse slightly. So instead of using the brakes, you're taking speed away from the wheels a different way, and that is regenerating some battery power, but it's also meaning you're emitting less brake dust as well. So there's a kind of an additional benefit there, I guess, of transitioning to EV. I'm nearly finished, and we'll get onto the Q&A. Can the grid cope with all these new electric cars wanting to plug into the grid? Yes, it can. There is always a but. Not everyone's going to switch to an EV overnight. If we could come off this call and every single person in the country switch to an EV by the time they woke up in the morning, the grid might struggle. that's realistically that's not going to happen. Obviously, that's not going to happen. It's going to be a gradual switch over to EV, even if we might want it to go faster. So as the renewable generation grows, the grid is developing as well. You may have seen some of the press releases from National Grid recently about kind of what they're planning to do to upgrade the grid. They obviously are aware this is coming down the line at them, along with heat pumps and all the other things that are kind of transitioning off of oil and gas onto electricity. So they are making plans. They're putting things in place to make sure that the demand, when the demand is there, the network, the kind of big national network will have the capacity on it to deal with it. On top of that, we're also making some other gains in other areas around the electricity use. So you can see there, our peak demand has fallen 16% since 2002 because things have got more efficient. The other thing we can do to help, kind of beyond the grid making their own upgrades, is try and spread out that demand. So I'm going to use myself as an example again. I have a time of use tariff on my home electricity supply. That means that I get to charge my car for 7.5p per kilowatt overnight between the hours of 11:30 and 5:30, which means that I don't get home and plug my car straight in at 6 p.m. Or if I do, I can delay the charge until overnight when there's much less demand on the grid. That means that I'm not plugging my car in and drawing a load of power along with everybody else when they all get home, put the kettle on, put the TV on, start making dinner. All of those kind of energy intensive activities that happen when we get home, if you can delay some of that, including EV charging, into the middle of the night when there's much less demand on the grid, it smooths out that demand curve when that's much easier for the grid to cope with, particularly when there is when we're looking at new forms of power as well. Apologies, there is one more Slido question, so hopefully you didn't all close that window. But what is the most efficient fuel source for driving? Ooh. I thought that might get some people. Right. Interesting. That's pretty much it, I think. Interesting result. Okay, let's have a look. So, what is the role of hydrogen in this? And is it more efficient than EVs? It certainly has its place in a zero emissions future. For me and for a lot of people in the industry at the moment, that place is not cars. There are, like I say, there are places where hydrogen makes a lot of sense. So places like non-road mobile machinery, diggers, things that work on building sites, that kind of thing, where there isn't a guaranteed electricity supply, particularly if you're breaking new ground, or if there is no existing grid connection and you're using, machinery that's got a large power demand. There is no functional electric alternative at the moment. It's not to say that it won't come, but right now that doesn't exist. As you can see from the picture and the graphs there, if you're direct charging, so if you're generating renewable energy, you're putting it through the transmission and distribution network into an EV and using that to drive, you're getting around about 73% of the original 100% power that you started with. Hydrogen sits around about 22%, power to liquid down at 13%, so a bit measly overall. There are some pretty significant issues with hydrogen as well in terms of how you get it somewhere. So there is an argument that you could repurpose existing petrol and diesel forecourts. There used to be 13 hydrogen fueling stations around the country. There are now 5. So that is a significant challenge. I was at an event a year and a half ago or so, and I test drove Toyota, hydrogen-powered Toyota. The guys there told me that they had to take their vehicles away from their showroom to fuel them up at one of these fueling stations a fair way away, and bring them back before they could test drive any of their vehicles. So that's not ideal, I guess, if you're looking to test drive at one of those vehicles and you don't live within a reasonable distance of one of those fueling stations. So hydrogen at the moment, looks a bit like a bit of a non-starter. And I was talking to somebody earlier today who also was at an event, and the manufacturers, the vehicle manufacturers at that event, again, were saying that, particularly for passenger cars and even for things up to HGVs, there is no current demand, there is no current thinking that hydrogen is going to be the way forward, really. A lot of them are putting all of their weight now behind EVs, even for the bigger end of stuff. So yeah, for the minute at least, it seems that hydrogen is a bit of a non-starter for passenger transport. Last, I think, slide from me, and then we'll go into a bit of the Q&A. Which one costs more to run? Again, a bit of a one that we get a lot. So at the moment, and this is from ZapMap, so some of their really useful analysis work, which again is updated every month. So again, go and have a look at ZapMap if you want to see what this looks like in a couple of months' time. But at the moment, unless you are doing almost all of your charging on rapid chargers, or a lot of your charging on rapid chargers, and mixing that with other public charging, which is more expensive than charging at home, it is probably going to cost you less to drive an EV, to fuel an EV, than it is to fuel your ICE vehicle. This analysis by ZapMap does not include things like insurance. It doesn't include the upcoming vehicle excise duty changes, and it doesn't include servicing and maintenance costs. But you do have to pay those on whichever car you drive anyway. If you weren't aware, every new EV and all of those registered from April 2017 onwards are going to have to pay vehicle excise duty as of April next year. That currently sits at a standard rate for all cars of £190 a year. For the first 5 years from year 2, if your car has a list price of over £40,000, you also need to pay the expensive car supplement for 5 years from year 2. So that currently sits around about £410 a year, and that will affect a large number of EVs, as it does with internal combustion engine vehicles at the moment as well. But those are just some other costs to kind of be aware of when you're thinking about how much it might cost you to drive to run an EV versus a petrol diesel vehicle. These the figures on that screenshot from ZapMap there do run on the Ofgem price cap, so which is currently 24.5p per kilowatt at home, for all of those that are the likes of the John and Rosa and Michael and Marie, who are doing at least some of their charging at home from a domestic supply. Like I said earlier, there are time of use tariffs available for EV drivers and other users, which can significantly reduce that cost per kilowatt hour. So that's not kind of the entire picture. So there is a bit of homework, I guess, to kind of understand exactly what it's going to cost you and your situation, and whether you can access home charging or not. But I have spoken for a very long time. I hope that's been interesting. I am looking forward to some of your questions and hopefully I can answer some more and give you a bit more confidence if there's anything I haven't already covered that has answered any of your questions. Now, I know there's been a few, so Matthew.
Yes,
how are
hello.
we looking?
We're looking good. Yeah, we've got some good questions in. I just, before we move on, I just obviously everyone on the call, if you do have any questions, obviously please use that Q&A. Thank you to Mike and Mary who've put some questions up there already. Thank you very much, Mark. I think it's a really interesting presentation. There's lots of information. I think when we're talking about the climate emergency, sometimes it's quite interesting to think what little things can individuals do to make a difference. Sometimes it isn't about cost savings. We know there's going to be an outlay for getting electric vehicles, but for those of us who are looking at changing cars and have the ability, that idea of making that change to EV now, knowing that actually over the lifespan of that vehicle, it's going to reduce the carbon footprint of our travel. I think it's a really important factor to think that we can do that and make that change. And I think most interesting for me, I think, is often about this a couple of bits of fake news. The fact that I always hear people talking about kind of the lifespan of an EV vehicle, and actually you should just keep on with a petrol car. So I think that's really fascinating to know that actually over that lifespan, it's better off. And also that idea that hydrogen's the way forward. And do you know what? Don't buy EV now. Go hydrogen, or wait 5 years, 10 years. From your perspective, obviously, you're saying now that hydrogen isn't obviously as efficient and not going to be the way forward right now. Do you foresee that it will in future, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or is it? Do you think that's just going to die out?
That's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question, and it came up on a webinar that I was on earlier. Almost that exact question, actually. At the moment, it doesn't. It looks like hydrogen's going to sort of peter out a little bit. Like I said, there may be a role for it, but it's probably in quite defined use kind of applications where you have a consumer already identified for your hydrogen before you've even almost built the plant to generate it. So, for example, I know there is a hydrogen plant being built in North Kent. Almost all of the hydrogen that they produce from that plant is going to go into the Transport for London bus fleet. That plant's not operational yet. London buses don't have the buses yet to run it to use the fuel, but there is kind of that almost kind of closed loop where there is a demand for hydrogen for whatever reason, and the supply comes to meet it. In terms of consumer vehicles, I think too many manufacturers at this point are going down the EV route and are kind of fully committed themselves to an EV offering. So unless something massive changes, I don't think there's going to be a market for hydrogen particularly. The other consideration around hydrogen, I didn't mention it on the slide, is kind of how you generate the hydrogen in the first place, or where the electricity is coming from to generate that hydrogen in the first place, because they're all, when you get kind of really into it, you get blue, green, pink, brown types of hydrogen, and it's all to do with where you source the fuel to make the hydrogen from, and how you power the electrolysis, or how you power the process of extracting that hydrogen. And so it's not a carbon-free process to kind of create and use that hydrogen, in the same way that it's not at the moment a completely carbon-free process to drive an EV or to produce an EV.
I think that's really helpful, and you're right. It's that demand, isn't it? We're actually, EV vehicles are just plugging into an existing energy network that's there. So it makes complete sense that's just a much frictionless approach, really, to kind of changing that mode of travel. What I will do is, we do have some Q&A, so anyone, if you've got any more, do shove them in there. I'll go through them in reverse order. I think that's fair. So the first question we got from Mike early on in the presentation was about the banning of PHEV from 2035. Do you think that if they are going to be banned in 2035, Mike's asking, are petrol hybrids going to be axed before then, or at that point? Is it illegal to sell from that point?
Yeah, really good point. Thanks, Mike. So at the moment, it is a ban on the sale of new PHEVs or anything else with an internal combustion engine from 2035. I think that ban, or under the previous government at least, that ban applied to everything. So PHEVs, mild hybrids, anything else that didn't have a battery electric component would all have been banned at the same time in 2035 for cars and vans. There is a little bit of uncertainty around exactly what Labour promised in their manifesto about moving that date back to 2030. Watch this space, I guess. I think if anything changes, it will be exactly what you've just said, or exactly what you read out, Matthew. It will be kind of a phased approach where some are banned earlier than others. But at the moment, the way that we understand it, at least in the Energy Saving Trust, is that it is a ban on all of them at the same time for those types of vehicles.
Excellent. That's really helpful. Mary had a question which she answered for herself, which was about the speed of charging and how rapid and ultra rapid chargers are obviously able to charge much higher than because of the direct current. What that led me on to think about though myself was, does the speed of charging affect the cost? So when you are going to a what I'm going to call a pump, but an electricity pump, if you're going fast or you're going rapid, is there a change in that cost to the consumer, or is it purely based on the amount of electricity you're using?
So there is something called the Public Charge Point Regulations 2023 that is now fully enforced as of last week, I think. And one of the stipulations of that is that the pricing must be clear to the consumer at the point of use. But to answer your question directly, Matthew, yes, it does affect the cost. The bigger rapid and ultra rapid units are understandably more expensive to install from an operator's point of view, and so that cost gets passed on, at least in part, to the consumer. Again, it's not quite the same, but kind of in a similar way to if you fill up with petrol or diesel at a motorway service area, you pay a premium for that. You will also pay a small premium for charging at a rapid or ultra rapid station. It is based on the energy you draw. So every charge point now has a price per kilowatt for the power that you draw from it. But for rapid and ultra rapid chargers, that the price per kilowatt is often more pence than it would be at a standard or a fast charger. So I think that, and again, I'm paid by ZapMap, but ZapMap have done some really good analysis on this. They do every month. They do a kind of roundup across the country of what the average fast charger costs and what the average rapid and ultra rapid charger costs. I think at the moment it's sat around something like 54p, I think, for a fast charger, and about 70-ish p per kilowatt for a rapid and ultra rapid charger.
Excellent, that's brilliant. For anyone on the call, if you're looking for ZapMap, obviously you can Google ZapMap, but also they're both Wokingham and Woodley councils. We both have climate emergency hubs, information hubs on our websites, and there are links to ZapMap and a variety of other resources on there. So that's always a good point of call if you're looking for some more information. Sophia, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just to add at this point that we have further information under My Journey website. There is an FAQ document with frequently asked questions around EVs, and also where users can find charge points within Wokingham and beyond, like the ZapMap, and also those residents who don't have access to off-street parking, like they don't have a garage or a driveway, they can send us an email at the address that we have on the website and request a public charge point near their property.
Excellent. Thank you, Sophia. Right, we've got some more questions from Mike, so I want to make sure we get these in and answered. So Mike's asked, with many car companies expected to miss their EV target and receive fines, can we expect discounting on EVs over the next year or two? I would imagine to try and get rid of some stock and get them out.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think that's already starting to happen with a few companies already. If you look around, there's some quite good deals to be had on EVs. The other thing that is possible, or they're looking at modifying the scheme to make more possible, is not emissions trading, sales trading, effectively, where you can buy credits from another manufacturer who has sold more than enough EVs. So the likes of Tesla, who obviously everything they sell is EV, could help out another manufacturer who hasn't met their quota for EVs this year, effectively by trading them some credits. So that might happen as well. But yeah, I think for the minute at least, there are starting to be some big discount, or some discounts at least, popping up on EVs to try and hit those targets. The other thing we've seen also, or again are starting to see, is manufacturers deliberately holding back sales of petrol and diesel vehicles to artificially almost increase their proportion of EV sales. So yeah.
It's going to be interesting to watch how that market changes and how quickly that market will change. Yeah. Another question from Mike. Interesting, and it's obviously very, very current. What's the general impact on an EV range and I suppose battery performance in different temperatures? Obviously, Mike's referenced lower temperatures as we're lovely being hit with this week, but yeah, generally higher temperatures, lower temperatures. How does that affect the battery?
High temperatures. And when I say high, I'm guessing you're sort of meaning sort of heat wave type temperatures.
Yeah.
Not a huge impact. Obviously, you might switch the aircon on. That has an impact on battery range. I think I've never actually properly looked at it and studied it, but I think in my car, if I start off with a full charge and put the aircon on, it knocks about 20 miles off the range, something like that. In the cold, it does get affected a bit more. So again, you've got the aircon on, but you've also got the heating on. It's going to knock maybe 30 miles off the range, and it will be the vehicle itself will be less efficient to drive because it's using more power. So you do get a bit more of an impact in the cold. But I think my car, again, to use myself as an example, my car, I think was full the other day, and it will now do about 220, 230 miles to a charge. It's saying, which is pretty much accurate. A couple of years ago, I did have it running in the summer, and I got it up over 300 miles on a charge. I was nearly out of charge at that point, to be fair, but yeah, I did manage to do just over. I think I got to about 320 miles and bottled it with a few % left in the battery to get home. But yeah, it is possible to go kind of beyond what the manufacturers say. My general rule of thumb at the minute, if you're looking at if you want to do your own calculation on how far the battery is going to take you, if you're looking at EVs, is about 4 miles per kilowatt or just under, is a reasonable estimation of how far you'll get in most new EVs now.
Cool. Mike's asked if there are any grants for installing home charge points or any energy or other suppliers that might give discounted installations. I know when I looked a year ago, there were companies sort of throwing free home charge points in with the purchase of vehicles. Sophia has kindly, and if anyone's seen this, added a comment that there is a grant for renters and flat owners for electric vehicle charge point grant, and she's put a link in there. Are you aware of any other sort of grants that are available at the moment?
Yeah, so yeah, Matthew, you're right. There's still manufacturers kind of not quite throwing charge points anymore, but yeah, quite often a new finance deal or a new salary sacrifice deal will come bundled with an EV charger if you have access to off-street parking to put one in. The other option that our salary sacrifice company, Energy Saving Trust, offers is a set number of a calculation to give you essentially credit to the value of about 4,000 free miles of driving on their charge point network across the country. So we're with Octopus for our salary sacrifice scheme. They run something called the Electroverse, which is a kind of multi-operator use app for EV charging, and they'll give you credit on that if you can't have a home charger installed. The other grant, and I'm going to look at Sophia because it involves cable channels, is a grant that can allow you as a homeowner to install a home charger if you don't have access to a driveway. However, at the moment, the guidance for that, the guidance that hasn't been released with that grant funding puts all of the emphasis back onto the local authority to make the decision as to whether or not that's permissible. So, Sophia, do you want to come in here and explain Wokium's position?
Yeah, that's fine. Currently, we don't have a standard process for installing cross-pavement solutions or cable channels. As you mentioned, Mark, we are waiting for the government guidance that is going to shed some light about the approach that we are going to follow. at the moment, we don't allow, and in the future, we will not allow residents to trail cables across public footways or verges because that poses a trip hazard, and the residents will be liable about any damage that might be caused. For that reason, though, in order to assist those residents who don't have off-street parking, we have secured grants like the ORCS, the On-Street Residential Charge Point Scheme, and the LEVI that you mentioned earlier, the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Scheme. And we are trying to install residential charge points so that residents can have easy access, or they can charge their vehicle close to their houses, close to their properties.
Sophia, this might be one for you while you're here talking about that. Peter has asked a question saying, has anyone costed the need to upgrade the cables supplying individual inhabited roads rather than the grid itself? Is there a need to upgrade the sort of the general sort of infrastructure around streets to be able to provide the energy needed for kind of increased vehicles?
I'm not sure
So,
I know the answer to this question.
Okay. That's right.
Yeah.
Mark, do you have any comments on that?
I can try. So, Peter, if you mean the cables supplying individual houses, that is unlikely to be necessary. Your distribution network operator, your DNO, who I think for Wokingham is
SSCN,
SSCN.
Scottish
Thank
Southern.
Yeah. If you need it, they will come and upgrade your main fuse in your house, so that it can cope with an EV charger being installed. But the cabling to your house is very unlikely to need an upgrade to cope with one EV charger being plugged in. If you mean in terms of the projects that Sophia was talking about in terms of residential charging, yes, and that is included in the cost of installing the charge points from the operators. So that's where you might see some additional groundworks happening to make sure those cables are suitable for EV charging. If that's what you mean, hopefully that's given you a bit of an answer, Peter.
Obviously, Peter, if there's any follow-up you need on that, do feel free to kind of add a comment onto your original post or add a new one in the Q&A. I think we've just about gone through the Q&As. I've got a couple more of my own questions. I'm gonna jump in and ask them while I'm here. One is probably to Resh and Sophia, and I don't know whether you know any about this. Obviously, at the moment, Wokingham has essentially a bulk buying scheme for solar panels that runs, I don't know how often, I think it's probably once a year or something, where a number of residents will indicate they're interested in solar panels to the property. Woking will take those together and obviously go out to tender and get almost reduced costs. Do you know if there might be in the future the ability to do that for, say, home charging points, so that individuals that want to get a home charger might be able to get a discounted solution by doing it in some sort of bulk buying scheme that the borough might be able to influence?
So with the Solar Together scheme, so the Solar Together scheme is a scheme that we and a lot of other Berkshire local authorities sign up to. So they go out to a tender process with energy companies for solar paneling. But as part of that, you can buy also discounted battery storage for your homes and also EV chargers. So you can register your interest through that scheme. So the scheme has closed for this year, but we hope to be running it again next year as well, if we get approval.
Excellent. Well, that's a good opportunity, obviously, for people who, again, that's kind of follows Mike's question about grants. It's another line of possibly being able to get a slightly cheaper solution in your home. We have a new post in. So Peter's just come back and said, so he meant the road as a total rather than individual houses.
Yeah, so that is part of what is covered by the funds that Sophia mentioned, the AUX fund and the LEVI fund. The funding can be used towards grid upgrades and cabling to individual charge points along a road, if that's necessary, and that's something that the operators would carry out as part of their installation when they install the EV charge points. in combination with the likes of Sophia, or
Cool.
Sophia's colleagues.
It is worth also mentioning that because these residential charge points are lower power, usually 7 kilowatt, they don't have any, they don't trigger any issues to the grid, and if installations are close to the SSEN network, DNO costs, like the electrical costs, tend to be low.
Cool.
Or more reasonable.
Yeah, and Peter's just come back on that to say he's talked about he's talked to the energy company about upgrading a fuse and got quoted £850. So it's obviously quite a bit of money there.
Yeah, that's worth going back to them, I think, Peter. My understanding is that main fuse upgrades should be funded. Certainly, it was for us when we had ours installed. So I don't know what's.
It's probably worth an
different there.
investigation and have a look around about that. Peter, if we find any information after this, what we'll do is we've got your details on this, and we'll try and feed some information on that back if it is a case that obviously that they should be doing that for free or funded elsewhere. So what we will do, I think, just about finished the Q&As out. I have one last overarching question for you, Mark, and it's really the future of EVs. We've seen obviously a real improvement in the efficiency of batteries that are going in vehicles now, and obviously from 10-15 years ago when there were only a couple of really makes and models of cars available, you know, every manufacturer now has something on the market. Do you foresee in the next 5 to 10 years that again the efficiency of those batteries will just increase and range will increase and charging times will reduce as those batteries become more efficient? What do you see as the future of EVs maybe in the next sort of 10 to 15 years?
That's a really interesting question. So I think there's probably a couple of different routes it could go. I think, increasing battery efficiency is one of them. Definitely. We're also seeing or starting to see sort of the early stages of trials of people producing different sorts of batteries where I'm going to get this right way around, where they are effectively smaller and lighter, but also more energy dense. So they can pack more energy into a smaller space, which means they don't weigh as much, and you get kind of increases in efficiency in terms of driving that way as well. But those batteries, I guess the question mark at the moment is, can they maintain their battery health? Because obviously you're piling kind of complexity upon complexity at that point, trying to get a rapid charge into those batteries, and they're storing more energy in a smaller space. And how you manage the heat dissipation is a whole challenge. I think there's certainly kind of innovation in terms of battery chemistry. There's innovation in terms of battery size. There's innovation in terms of kind of what else the batteries can do, how else they might be charged. So we talked about cost pavement solutions. The other solution that is being trialed in a few areas at the minute across the world, a few in this country but not too many, is wireless charging. So inductive charging. So you do away with all of the plugs in their entirety. You quite literally roll over a charge point and you start charging. You don't have to swipe a card. You don't do anything. The car talks to the charger. The charger talks to the car. They both agree a price. Obviously that's set in advance, and then they bill you at the end of it. That requires a few things to happen, obviously, at the same time, in terms of different bits of technology coming together. But it's certainly a possibility that is being thought about. And I think that's probably about. I think what we're probably reaching is the limit of the size of batteries that can be put into a vehicle in their current state. So the biggest batteries in the very top end Teslas and that Mercedes that I was talking about earlier are topping out about 110 kilowatt hours at the minute, which is a hefty battery to be lugging around. So I think probably batteries won't get a much bigger. They may well get more efficient, and they may well get better energy storage and better energy distribution, perhaps. But I think we're probably about there in terms of battery size. So yeah, lots of watch this space. Unfortunately, there's no kind of guaranteed one way it's going to definitely go.
Yeah, and as we know, obviously with targets that we all have to as organisations to hit a carbon neutral status, and that idea of trying to encourage as many people in the public to kind of reduce their carbon footprint, I think, you know, we make the steps we can now, and in 10, 15 years we'll see what the situation is, and we'll keep making those steps and keep making those changes. Brilliant. Okay, well, I think that really brings the webinar to a close. So I obviously want to thank, firstly, I want a massive thank you to Mark for taking the time tonight to run this session for everyone. It's been really informative. It's been fantastic, and thank you. I think everyone here has felt the information come across. It's been brilliant. Massive thank you also to Resh and Sophia from Woking Borough Council for coming on and answering the questions. They've put a number of links to information on Woking Borough's site. Obviously, as Woking Borough is the highways authority for the area, they have a lot of power and control over what happens, and they will be making some massive steps to again help all of us that live in the borough be able to make these changes. And obviously, finally, a massive thank you to those of you who've taken the time to come on the webinar tonight, and also anyone who watches it in the future. A reminder that this will be online. We will be holding, putting the Q&As online as well. If you do have any feedback or any questions after this event, please feel free to direct them to myself. My email address is matthew.fillmore@woodley.gov.uk. You're more than welcome to email me. You can email our admin@woodley.gov.uk email address as well. And if you need those contact information, it is on our website. So please, any feedback or any further comments you have, please send them through to me. Final reminder that we do have some more events going on for Climate Action Week this week, running on Friday and Saturday are our last sort of open public events. So if you are free and you're a loose end, you want to bring a few friends down to a bit of coffee and cake and a chat on Friday, or to a bit of a climate card game on Saturday, then please do. Otherwise, hope all of you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for being involved. Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone. Bye.